When we look at reasons for the decline, all three of these empires are going to decline for similar reasons. And so one of the ongoing problems was secession. And this is a problem that plagued all of our Islamic empires going back to the very first. And the big issue was that Muhammad never left rules for secession. There are no rules for secession in the Islamic faith. And so this led to constant conflict every time a ruler died. And so it led to many times when a new ruler took power, he killed off his own relatives to ensure that they didn't try to compete with him for power. It meant that when a ruler died, oftentimes his sons would fight for that position. And it just led to ongoing conflict every time a ruler died. And this was a problem that plagued all three of these empires. Also, government corruption. Bribery becomes a new way of doing business. Positions in government were sold. And so instead of going to the people that really deserved it, it was going to whoever could pay the most. Also, the harem plays a big role in this decline. Rulers were basically raised in seclusion in the harem, in the palace. And so they grew up in isolation. And part of that was to protect them from rivals trying to kill them. But they didn't learn what they needed in order to be great rulers. And instead, they grew up in this life of luxury and seclusion in the palace. Another growing problem in all three of these empires was general tensions, and a lot of that revolved around religious tensions. So, for example, in the Mughal Empire, under Aurangzeb, he reverses that policy of toleration, and that's going to lead to animosity amongst the majority Hindu population. We also see a lot of religious conservatives in all three of these empires, but we especially see this in the Ottoman Empire. Religious conservatives begin to turn away from new ideas and new technologies that were coming out of Europe. And so a lot of technologies that could have helped, like the printing press, are going to be ignored, mostly because they were coming from Europe. And they're also going to resist some new military technologies coming out of Europe and industrial ideas as well. When we look at reasons for the decline, one major reason for decline is all three of these empires basically stop expanding. And as they stopped expanding, well, that stopped bringing new money into these empires. And so in the Ottoman Empire, for example, once they stopped expanding, it led to them reducing the size of their military. It also meant that as they gained new territory, they had to spend more and more money on their huge bureaucracy. And so not only were they now bringing in less income, they were spending more on their government. And so as they tried to reduce the size of their military and reform their military, this led to revolts, especially from the Janissaries. We also see the economy begin to stagnate. And this was due in part to raising taxes to try to cover the increasing cost of this bureaucracy. It was also led to a failure to expand upon trade. And again, they lose a lot of their trade initiative to the Europeans. And so foreign trade is going to decline. Another major reason for their decline is their militaries. And so all three of these empires were built using European weapons. And they imported guns and cannons from Europe and used it to build their empires. However, they never developed their own. Instead of learning from the Europeans and then using that to build their own weapons, they were content to continue to import weapons from Europe. And the problem with that is that they were getting outdated weapons. Europe was constantly updating not just their military technology, but also their military tactics. And they were always several steps ahead. And so by the time these technologies reached these Muslim empires, Europe had already developed something better. And so they were always getting kind of outdated technology when it came to their military. So the final kind of reason for the decline of these empires is cultural insularity, basically a cultural conservatism. And so they come to view a lot of these outside ideas as threatening. And Muslims very seldom traveled to Western Europe. They were kind of confident of their own superiority and didn't realize that all these changes that were taking place in Europe, like the scientific revolution, all these new technologies that were spreading in Europe, were superior to what they had. They believed that they really had nothing more to learn from the Europeans. And so they become kind of ignorant of these European technological developments and come to see them as a threat to their own order and stability. One good example of this is a printing press. The printing press originally was allowed in limited supply in the Ottoman Empire, but ultimately conservatives are going to ban the printing press because they were worried that it would start to spread questions about Muslim religion and Muslim power. And so they cut off the printing press in the Ottoman Empire. And so this xenophobia becomes kind of a cultural trait of these Islamic empires. Foreign innovations are seen as a threat to their political stability. And so rather than learn from these outside ideas, they repress them. And as a result, their military, their political institutions, their economies all become outdated.